President Donald Trump and his administration have some bad news for foreign nationals who want to move into America just to rake in the free benefits and abuse the American system and American taxpayers. The bad news for the system abusers is good news for hardworking Americans who will hopefully save billions in taxes. This idea likely comes from Trump's concept that he wants people moving into America to prove that they won't help drain the American taxpayer's pocket by moving in and getting themselves on welfare. President Trump wants people who move to America to be providers and hard workers, not people who want to collect a check without earning it. If that's the best idea, that remains to be seen. There are good people who may not have the best paying jobs, but that doesn't mean there'll be a drain on the system either. President Trump's idea would need to include people who work, not just the best people. Any working man is the best person for a country, regardless of salary. So according to this report, President Trump's administration is set to roll out a plan in the next month that bars foreign nationals who need government welfare to live from resettling in the United States, an effort aimed at saving American taxpayers billions. Since February of this year, Breitbart News has reported that the Trump administration has weighed its options in enforcing an existing law whereby foreign nationals seeking to legally immigrate to the country would need to prove that they will not become drains on the taxpayer system. This rule seeks to reduce the burden of current mass legal immigration levels from primarily poor countries from which the United States imports more than 1.5 million mostly low-skilled foreign nationals every year, and basically helping those countries that they left because those countries' governments are saying, obviously, good riddance. As part of the plan, legal immigrants living in the country of the United States would be less likely to be able to obtain permanent residence in the country if they have used any form of welfare in the past, including using Obamacare, food stamps, and public housing. Officials with the Department of Homeland Security say the federal statutes that would give the Trump administration the authority to bar welfare-dependent foreigners from obtaining green cards is a long-standing law, noting that such rules are enforced in many other nations' immigration systems across the globe. Australia, for example, has sought to lower the number of welfare-dependent legal immigrants entering their country every year by mandating that migrants meet a certain level of merit-based requirements. As noted by this report, welfare used by households headed by legal and illegal immigrants in the United States is vastly more prevalent than that of households headed by native-born Americans. Immigrant households consume 57% more food stamps than American citizen households, 33% more cash welfare, and 44% more in Medicaid dollars. This straining of public services by a booming 44 million foreign-born population translates to the average immigrant household costing American taxpayers $6,234 approximately in federal welfare. The U.S. has imported more than 10 million legal immigrants in the last 10 years. Since 2008, the country admitted and permanently resettled close to 10.8 million legal immigrants, a foreign population that exceeds the entire population of New York City, where more than 8 million residents live. This seems like a perfect way for President Trump to save millions, possibly billions, and use that money to build his border wall. Is that what he plans to do? We're not sure. It almost sounds like he might be cutting the welfare for new immigrants and then redirecting the previously used funding for something else. Or maybe America just saves a few bucks and doesn't waste it on something we may not need. According to this report, it personally thinks the funding can be used to mass-produce straws and get California so angry that they build a big wall on their border and leave the rest of America alone. 75% of Democrats think the Trump administration is too aggressive in trying to stop the flow of illegal immigrants into the United States. a view shared by only 23% of Republicans and a plurality of 46% of unaffiliated voters. Among all voters, 49% say the administration is too aggressive trying to stop illegal immigration. 25% say it's not aggressive enough, while 21% view the administration's policies as about right. Even from the 1950s, when President Truman enacted the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1952. Now, there have been modifications to that act. Parts of the act remain in place today, but it has been amended many times, probably by Democrats, and was modified substantially by the Immigration and Nationality Services Act of 1965, when regulations issued under the authority of the Passport Act in 1926 were challenged in Hague versus Agee. Congress enacted of the Foreign Relations Authorization Act, fiscal year 1979, enacted October 7th of 1978, and amending the Immigration and Nationality Act, making it unlawful to travel abroad without a passport until that legislation under the Travel Control Act of 1918, the president and the authority to require passports for foreign travel only in times of war. So provisions that excluded certain classes of immigrants based on their political beliefs were revoked by the Immigration Act of 1990. However, members of communist parties are still banned from becoming citizens of the United States, according to this Immigration and Nationalities Act of 1952. And last time I checked, ladies and gentlemen, President Trump was probably barely even born. So in other words, this has been around for decades. According to President Trump, the United States will not be a migrant camp, and it will not be a refugee holding facility. It won't be. And only 30% of the poll taken disagree with that. It found that gender, race, and age also play a role in determining how one feels about the family separation policy. Of those surveyed, it found that men and people over 40 and non-black minorities are more likely to blame the parents of migrant children for their circumstance, whereas women, black voters, and voters younger than 40 were more likely to deem the government's response as too aggressive. Inevitably, over half, or 52% of all voters, favored the immigration reform plan detailed by President Trump in his State of the Union speech that would create a pathway to citizenship for those brought to this country illegally when they were children, build a wall on the Mexican border, and change legal immigration to a more merit-based system. And judging by the results of the poll, it seems that the hard work of pushing their propaganda has not paid the dividends that the progressives were wanting. People are not as ignorant as the left would like them to believe. And as that was the case when the American people elected President Trump, they can form their own opinions. And just a side note on the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1952, set up by President Truman, after the September 11, 2001 attacks, President George W. Bush implemented the National Security Entry-Exit Registration System and other border and immigration controls. In January of 2017, President Donald Trump's Executive Order 13769 made reference to the Immigration and Nationalities Act. So, ladies and gentlemen, over the years, probably 30 plus years, there have been many redactions and many modifications and amendments of this act.